Canadians have a secret, and it's called the Butter Tart. When I was a kid growing up in Canada, I didn't even know that Butter Tarts were Canadian. It wasn't until I left and I came down to America and I never saw them again. Now, I can't even understand how that can be, and I think that once you make Butter Tarts and try a Butter Tart, you'll agree with me. So let's change that situation. We're gonna make a Butter Tart which is really similar to a pecan pie in a way, but it's so delicious, made in little muffin tins, beautiful pastry with an ooey gooey caramelly butter filling. That'll just make you so happy. You'll stop for a moment, the world will stop spinning, and you will be happy. So the first thing we have to do is make the pastry. And there's one rule with the pastry, it must be a butter pastry. So no shortening in this, very simple, just flour and guess what? Butter, okay? Flour, butter, sugar, salt, a little bit of water. Let's start with our all-purpose flour in the food processor because that's the easiest way to make pastry. Of course you can make this by hand if you like, but this is super simple. We're gonna put a teaspoon of salt in here. We're gonna put about 4 teaspoons of sugar in here because this is a sweet pastry. We're gonna just buzz that around to mix it together. Now we're gonna add some butter to this pastry. Now I take my butter and I cut it into pieces, then I freeze it because when you're putting the butter into the food processor, it's going to be really powerful and cut that up into small pieces really quickly. So having it frozen gives you a little more control. Woo. So here goes our butter. And now we're gonna buzz that around until it's about the size of a pea. Now you're gonna reach in very carefully because the blades are in there and try and pull up some of that butter to see what size it is. Now I've still got some big chunks in there, so I'm probably gonna put that on for a little bit longer. Some of them are small enough, but still some big chunks. So let's buzz it around a couple more times, then we'll get to adding our liquids. Now because the butter is such an important ingredient to this pastry, I'm using really good butter, the best butter I can find. Unsalted, European cultured butter. That'll give us more flavor. Of course, I'm also gonna add something else that'll give us a little bit of flavor, and that is some lemon juice. So a teaspoon of fresh lemon juice here. If you can't find European cultured butter, that lemon juice is really important. But otherwise, just make sure you put that in. Use the best butter you can. Now we're also gonna add some cold water. I have some water here that has ice cubes in it, so I ensure that it's really, really cold. And I'm gonna add between 8 and 12 tablespoons to this pastry. That's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And we're gonna buzz that around, then we'll take a look. If it needs a little more, we'll add a few more tablespoons. It's pretty dry. I don't see a lot of pastry coming together, so let's put some more water right in there. We don't want to add too much water if we can help it, just enough to get that pastry to come together. Now I can see the change as it moves around the food processor. It moves a little more slowly. That gives me a clue, a hint, that tells me if I go in here with my hand, I bet you very carefully again, I can grab this pastry, squeeze it together, and it's gonna come together as a nice dough. So we're done. No more water, no more flour. Everything is good. All we're going to do now is turn this out onto the counter and shape it into 2 discs. So now this might not look very promising to you at this time, but have some faith, have some water on hand, have some flour on hand, and you can make this pastry come together. So gather it all up with your hands. This is where you use your hands to help you. Pastry needs to stay cold, but your hands are warm. Use that tool To help bring this pastry together, if it's a little dry, use your hands to melt that butter just a little bit, and that'll help it come together. We want 2 discs out of this pastry, so once I've gathered it together, I'm going to sort of cut it roughly in half, and then shape this into 2 rounds. Now the reason you want to shape this into a round is because, well, generally you're rolling pastry out into a round, and you should start with the same shape that you hope to end up with. So a nice round disc will end up with a nice round pie circle. For our butter tarts, because we're doing individuals, it doesn't really matter if it's round, but shape it into whatever shape you like, rectangular. Make sure you push all those pieces together, melting it a little bit with your hand if you need it to be a little more moist. That's one, and we'll do the other. Now at this point, you can take a look at your pastry and know whether you've done a good job or not, just by looking to see, can you see any pieces of butter in there? If you see flecks of yellow, flecks of butter, you know that's a good sign, because that butter, in its solid state like that, has some water in it. When you bake it, that water will evaporate and push the layers of flour apart, making beautifully flaky pastry. Okay, now we're going to wrap these 2 discs in plastic wrap, and we're going to put these in the fridge. It's really important for pastry to stay cold and to have time to rest. After you've activated gluten, you let it rest so that then you have an easier time rolling it out. And after you roll it out, you let it rest again so that it doesn't shrink up when you put it into the oven. Your pastry needs to sit in the fridge and rest for at least 30 minutes, or perhaps overnight, but at least 30 minutes, then you can actually start to roll it out and fill your muffin pan with the pastry. So I have some pastry here that I made previously. You can see how beautiful it is because you can see the chunks of butter throughout that pastry. So we're going to put this onto a rolling spot, whether that's your counter or a silicone mat like I have here. Add a little bit of flour, not too much, just a little. And we're going to start to roll this out to a nice even thickness. Turn that every once in a while to make sure it's not stuck to your counter or your mat, and to keep it rolling into a nice even shape. Once it's evenly thick, and we're looking at about 1/4 of an inch thick here, you're going to get a circle cutter to cut this pastry into circles that are about 1 inch to 2 inch bigger than your muffin cup. So if you want really high sides, you're going to go with a 2 inch bigger circle cutter. If you don't mind the low sides, then you go with a smaller cutter. And then doing your best to waste as little pastry as possible, cut these into circles. Once you have all your circles, let's just move them to one side, because you still have a lot of excess pastry that you can knead one more time and put these into circles again. So we have 6 circles there. I'm just going to knead this gently back together one more time, and we'll roll it into another evenly thick piece. Now if you're lucky, you can get 2 more circles out of this, and we are lucky. Okay, so now we have 12 little pastry circles. Let's bring in our muffin pan, and we're gonna line the muffin pan with these pastry circles. You just pinch the dough in. A butter tart should have little wrinkled edges, just like this. And we'll fill all 12 cups. Once we've filled the 12 cups, you know what has to happen. Pastry needs to rest, so it has to go back into the refrigerator while we make the filling. Okay, once you have every single cup filled, don't stress out about how they look, because a butter tart should be rustic and unique, each and every one. Butter tarts are not beauty pageant winners with respect to the tart world. They're rustic, they're charming, and they're delicious. This has to go into the fridge. With your pastry shells resting, now it's time to make the filling. We're gonna start with 2 eggs. And we're gonna beat these with an electric hand mixer. You can use a whisk if you'd like to, but you can take the lazy route as well. And we're gonna beat them till they're nice and fluffy. Once they're light in color, we're gonna add our sugar, some brown sugar, some corn syrup. Now, I never said this was good for you, but it is delicious. It's one of those every once in a while kind of treats. So corn syrup, brown sugar, and some melted butter. And then we're gonna beat this again. Okay, we just have a few more ingredients to get into this mix. First, we're gonna put in some vanilla extract, pure vanilla extract. It's tastier than the artificial. We're gonna put in some white vinegar. And we're gonna put in a pinch of salt. Mix it up again. And now we have some very important decisions to make. Because there are 3 types of butter tarts, and Canadians especially are very particular about what type of butter tart they prefer. You can get a plain butter tart, you can get a butter tart with raisins, or you can get a butter tart with either walnuts or pecans in them. So what to do here? Well, here's a solution. You can use this filling, fill all of your cups, and then decide to put some raisins in some walnuts or pecans in the other. So that's what we're gonna do. So use a pouring vessel like this to make it a little bit easier to pour into the muffin shells. Try not to drip it on the side of the pan because this is a lot of sugar, as you might have noticed, and that's gonna burn on the pan if you let it sit there. Now this mixture will bubble and boil in the oven, so don't fill it all the way to the rim. Leave a little bit of space for it to actually cook there. Now comes that ever important decision of how many do you leave plain, how many do you make with raisins, and how many do you put the nuts in. So entirely up to you, but you can put them in now knowing that those raisins will sink a little bit in the filling. They're already starting to right here. I like raisins, I like the plain ones, but I've never said no to a butter tart with nuts in it either. So I think you'll make everybody happy one way or another. And if you know right from the beginning that you prefer plain with nuts or with raisins, just mix it into the batter and then pour it into the shells. Now we're gonna take this pan and put it into a 350-degree oven for 25 to 30 minutes. When the butter tarts come out of the oven, they'll be all puffed up like this. So that's a normal look to the butter tart. They're going to sink, however, when they cool, and that's when you're gonna enjoy them. Once the butter tarts have had a chance to cool, they will sink a little bit. That is expected and perfectly normal. All you have to do now is remove them from your muffin pan. You should know that in Ontario, there are butter tart festivals and butter tart competitions. Maybe you're gonna enter your butter tarts in a competition, or maybe you just wanna eat one right now, which is exactly what I want to do. So keep on working, get them all out as quickly as you can before people start coming into your kitchen. But let me show you what they look like inside. A beautiful butter tart. This is the moment you've been waiting for. We're gonna break this open and show you the gooey, delicious. Look at this, my favorite with the raisins. Now you know, gorgeous. That, my friends, is Canada's best kept secret. Have you guys ever had a butter tart?
No, never.
Come on in. Okay. Grab this one. Split it in 2. Break it open.
All right.
Seriously. I can't wait.
Oh my goodness.
I know. Wait. Oh man.
Wow.
Get in there.
Here you go.
Come on. Oh, yeah. Do it. I want to know your first impression. Come on.
Cheers.
Cheers.
There's no polite way to do this. seriously.
Oh my gosh.
See?
Wow.
Yeah. Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you. It's pretty amazing. Huh?
Wow.
I know. I love them.
These
all the
are
time.
awesome.
Uh-huh.
Oh
What do you think?
This is the best.
I know.
So
Wow.
buttery.
See, look at you.
Yeah.
You just don't even want to put it down. Just use all your fingers and keep going.
Yeah.
Just-
Wow.
Are we still rolling?
Oh.